Hi, volleyball fans, and welcome back to Volley Talk, the podcast created for volleyball lovers who want to dig deep into what is going on in NCAA and international volleyball. I'm your host, Sarah Pavin. I'm an Olympian, beach volleyball world champion, former Nebraska Cornhusker, and longtime pro, both indoor and on the beach.
And I'm Adam Schultz, former indoor player, international volleyball coach, and the show's resident stat guy.
We are doing a little different rundown this week. We are overwhelmed in the best way possible with the amount of questions we've been getting. So since this was kind of a slower week with NCAA play, as far as, the matchups weren't marquee, we are going to devote the majority of the episode to knocking off a whole bunch of listener questions. Full disclosure, we got a lot of Nebraska questions. So we have separated them by topic. So if you want to jump around, if there's something you're not interested in, go to the chapter markers on YouTube or on your podcast app to find the section that best suits you. But other than that, we are going to mix a few other things into this episode, including a game Adam is excited about. But basically, moral of the story for this week is I have a bone to pick with the Big 12. And that is that. So we can't wait to dive in. So let's get started. For weekly highlights and happenings, the rankings stayed pretty consistent. The noteworthy movers happened more towards the bottom of the top 25. So we had North Carolina moving up to 15 from 21.
They keep beating good teams.
I mean, they got smashed by Stanford, but
I'm not saying necessarily this week, but in general, they are trending in a very positive direction.
they've had a couple good wins this season against highly ranked teams, that's for sure. USC jumped to 17 from 22. Indiana jumped to 18 from 24. That's a big leap.
That's a big jump.
Given who's below them, I feel like it's fair that they're above those teams.
Yes.
But I feel like 18 is generous. Mind you, after the top 10, I'm not super impressed with anybody.
It's a messy middle.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to put it. BYU dropped to 21 from 17.
And they keep losing. They're going to be out of the rankings next week.
You know who should be out of the rankings? We'll get to that in a minute. Baylor's down to 23 from 18. Iowa State just caused issues.
Yes. You got to beat those teams. And we watched Iowa State. I wasn't super impressed.
No. I was not either. But they joined the top 25.
And they earned it. You can't say that they didn't. But I'm just not, in watching them, I'm not sure how they're doing it.
No, they definitely earned it. I'm not trying to take anything away from them, but I am trying to take something away from like everybody ranked under the top 10 because it's just not.
The lack of consistency. Shocking.
And just like the level of performance, I'm just like, you guys, it's just the top 10 is way better.
But it's also the coach's inability to recognize when players are not performing for whatever reason and make changes.
There have been a lot of head-scratching decisions made this season.
Head-scratching decisions, but also lack of decisions. You've got 18 people on your roster. That is your
job as a coach. Make the decisions.
Yeah.
Make some moves.
Keep going.
Penn State is holding on by their fingernails.
They should not be in the top 25.
They're at 25. They dropped from 19. I don't know what the heck. Actually, we got a question. Let's address it. How is Penn State still ranked? That was the question. Their win record includes wins over New Hampshire, Bucknell, Princeton, Central Michigan. Is that really a strong enough resume to outweigh their losses and keep them ahead of other teams?
No. I mean, the question has a simple answer. In my opinion, they should not be ranked anymore.
Absolutely not. This is a straight respect ranking because they won the national championship last year. If this was any other team, they would have been long gone.
Rankings are, what have you done for me lately? And the answer for Penn State is they've
not
done
much.
Nothing. They had one good week where there was a glimmer of hope.
No, they had one good game where they beat Wisconsin. One game. We're not even putting a week together here.
And you thought that they were righting the ship, but that has not been the case.
They 100% should not be ranked. Actually, someone on YouTube did some legwork for us.
Oh, yeah.
Several weeks ago, we asked, or it came up somehow, when has it ever happened that the national champion from the year before has not made the tournament?
Okay, so here's the information that was dug up, and we greatly appreciate you doing this. I found it very interesting. Since 1981, the defending champion has missed the next year's tournament 3 times. In 1982, USC missed, and that was a 28-team draw. In 1984, Hawaii missed. That was also a 28-team draw. In 1994, Long Beach State didn't make it, and that was a 48-team draw. Now, the interesting thing is Penn State is the only school to have never missed the tournament. Nebraska's only missed once, and that was the first year. And I think they went undefeated in the Big 8 that year and still didn't make the tournament.
That's
So
tough stuff.
not sure how that works. But if Penn State misses this year, and I kind of think this is why the ranking is
They're
lagging,
not going to miss. The NCAA will make sure they don't miss just because
to
of that.
keep that stat going. Lots of intrigue happening here because their record is not very good.
Terrible.
I'm curious who's not going to make it ahead of them.
That will be controversy.
Yes. So
we are here for
something-
that. We will talk about that.
Something to keep your eye on. But thank you for the answers to that question. Very interesting.
100%. We also had another question. When the weekly rankings are released, is there any explanation given?
There's no explanation given, but I believe you can see how many first place votes and other votes that each of the schools have gone. So there is a bit of a tabulation, but the voters do not have to justify the votes that they make.
Yeah, you can see the first place votes and you can see teams that were voted for who didn't make the top 25. But as far as an explanation, absolutely not. As far as unexpected results this week, we have the Big 12 to thank, and that's about it.
Everything else is sailing smoothly. Teams who should be
Relatively.
winning are winning. I'd say the Big 10 has a messy middle as well.
The Big 10 has got a log jam at 6th place and
Yeah.
9th place or something.
So this is actually going to be really interesting for those teams because those are the ones that are on the bubble for the tournament. So these matches coming up in the Big 10, while the volleyball may not be top tier, and I'll point to the UCLA Northwestern game that happened, not amazing volleyball, but huge consequences on who's going to the tournament.
Yep. But the Big 12 is just messing me up right now, especially after that episode we did about them. Like, give me a break. Anyway, the results that really messed up things further in the Big 12, which I will say in our Power 4 preview episode, we did say that the Big 12 would be the messiest conference, that it was the weakest of the Power 4 conferences as far as like skill level of the teams, but that it would be the most interesting as far as the teams beating each other. So we did predict this. However, still frustrating doing an episode that we said what would happen. Arizona beat BYU in 4.
What is going on?
Kansas State beat Colorado in 3.
Which, again, Colorado is beating some good teams in the last week. And then, not that Kansas State isn't a good team, but that's one on the books that you would expect them to win given their previous history.
Correct.
Honestly, what I think is happening in the Big 12 is that there is an inability to prepare for matches that you should win. I think that all of those teams are riding roller coasters emotionally of big wins and not overlooking teams that are below them,
Maybe.
but just not getting to the same spot to execute.
You don't get weeks off. You don't get
No.
days off. You have to prepare the same for every single team. Or just respect every single team the same. There are no freebies here, people.
So here's my question for you. When it comes to playing a team that's close to you but maybe below you that you should be, whose responsibility is it to make sure you're prepared? Is it the athlete? Is it the coaching staff? Is it all of the above?
I think it starts at the top for sure. I think if a coach has a certain attitude about playing specific teams, then that trickles down to the team and there can be complacency. So I think you need to treat every single match the same from a routine perspective, preparation, video, information being disseminated about the players, whether you think they're good enough to disseminate that information or not. Like, you do it. And honestly, as an athlete, I always hated playing the quote unquote not good teams the most.
Well, yeah, because they're lose-lose, right? You're supposed to win. And if you don't win, it's a huge deal. And if you do win, what's supposed to happen.
But the last upset was Central Florida beat Iowa State in 3. Welcome to the top 25. Go lose to UCF. Wow. That's what kind of happened around the NCAA this week.
How many teams from the Big 12 do you think are going to go to the tournament? Like, what's the goal? If you're in the Big 12 right now, what do you think guarantees you a spot at the show?
I know somebody out there knows this. I don't have it in front of me right now. How many made it last season? I'm going to say top 5 or 6.
That was my instinct.
Because 9 made it from the Big 10 last year.
Yeah.
I'm going to say top 6.
Which means that, again, that conference in those positions is going to be really interesting.
They're keeping us on our toes over there in the Big 12. But yeah, that's what happened this week in our weekly roundup.
Okay, so it's time for a game, and we're going to play something new this week. It's something that I've been thinking about, wanting to talk about teams from a coach's perspective. We're going to do the Power 4 Coaches Mood Meter. This was actually harder than I thought, and in order to be fair, I used a random number generator to pick which teams we were going to include. I think in the future, we're going to do this by conference, but for the sake of this one, I have 8 teams that I've selected. You are going to rank them most unhappy to most happy from a coach's standpoint based on where they are at this point in the season. I feel like you should
be answering this question, not me.
We can do it together. I ended up picking 2 teams from each conference. So here they are. From the Big 10, we're going to look at Wisconsin, who's currently in 3rd place with a record of 11-3.
Wait, who's in 2nd?
Purdue.
Ooh.
We're going to look at USC, who is 10-4 in the Big 10 and currently tied for 4th. We're going to look at Colorado from the Big 12, currently 10-3 in 2nd place, although they are on a current 2-game losing streak. We're going to look at TCU, who is 8-5, tied for 6th place. They have won their last 2 matches, but they play Colorado and Iowa State next week. From the ACC, Miami and SMU both tied for 4th with an 11-3 record, currently winning games, a 6 and a 3-game win streak. And finally, from the SEC, Texas at 11-2, which is in 3rd place, and Kentucky, who is 13-0, in 1st place. So you tell me which coaches are the most unhappy. Give me a quick reason, and then we'll go up the list. So who's at number 8 for you?
Hold up. Are we going from
most unhappy
beginning of the season or like
if you
beginning of conference play?
As of this moment in time, looking back at the season and looking forward to it. So if I was to talk to their coach today, what is their mood like?
Okay, I'm sure I'm going to get roasted for these answers, but keep in mind, I have had no time to prepare here.
This is how we play games.
This
Sarah
is
gets no
right
prep time.
off the fly. So bottom 2. Okay, I will say
Let's go back and forth. Bottom 2, then I'll do my bottom 2, and we'll go from there.
Most unhappy, Texas.
Oh. Why?
Because I feel like at the beginning of the season, they expected to be in 1st in the SEC, and sitting at 3rd currently is well below the program's expectations.
Okay. I would have TCU at the bottom of that list. I think that they started so well and they had high expectations for the season.
You think they had high expectations for the season in July?
I think the coach thought that they could be very good.
Okay.
And you started out so well and you have just continually fallen off the map. Like at this point in the season, I think he's the most unhappy with how his team is playing.
7th, I'm going to go Wisconsin. I know this is tough. The reason I say that is like, yes, midsummer, Grace Lopez had gotten injured. They had to do a little finagling of their roster, but I think, they're always expecting to be top 2 to push Nebraska. I think getting absolutely hammered by Nebraska, and now they're not the team that they were. Not that they expected to be the exact same, but I think dropping into 3rd, I'm going to put them at 7.
I would agree. I would put Wisconsin at 7 for me as well. You never want to get embarrassed when you're a top team. And I think that Nebraska just showed that the gap is really big right now with them. Plus, your Purdue's ahead of you, and they lost all of their players. It's not going the way that it should. That game should have been competitive. You also lost your setter. I don't think it's happy in Wisconsin right now.
6th, I'm going to do SMU. They are definitely where everybody expects them to be, but I think they thought that this was potentially a year that they could push Pitt or Louisville to kind of elevate themselves above that 3rd spot, but instead they're where they've been for the last couple seasons.
I'm going to go with Texas next for the reasons that you said. I think the only bright spot about those 2 losses, and we kind of talked about this, was that your young players got experience. I'm not sure if I'm on the Texas staff that I want to go undefeated. I want opportunities for those young players to learn and to grow if the goal is to win a national championship. I don't love that I'm in 3rd place, so I'm unhappy about that. But there is a bright side to your athletes being in those difficult situations, especially when they're freshmen.
5th, I think I'm going to do TCU. I think they lost Melanie Para, so that was a huge hit to the program, but they started so strong or in the top ranking the program's ever had, but then the drop that we're seeing now, it's like, did they peak too early? Did teams figure them out? Were they not all that? And so to have that scramble happening, but being way ahead of where I would have thought they would be in the season, I mean, you've got to be okay with that right now.
I think I'm going with SMU next. I think for the same reasons that you said. You listen to their coach talk and about the program, about what they were doing, about what the athletes they brought in. I think they expected to take a step this year. I personally didn't agree with that assessment, but I think they believed they would be better. And they're, again, still in the same boat behind Pitt, Louisville. I know they beat Stanford, but record-wise, that's not the case. You've pulled in all of these new athletes, you're trying all of these things, and you're kind of ending up in the same place. So I think that's got to be a little frustrating.
4th, I'm going to go with Miami. I think they were kind of upper middle of the ACC last year. They lost Heredia Cologne, so not that there were huge expectations. Getting her back, do I think they thought they would be tied for 3rd currently? I would be shocked. I think that they should be very happy with where they currently are, given what their outlook was in May.
I'm going to put Miami at 4 as well for a slightly different reason. The reason for me that they're not higher is they've been inconsistent. I think they've lost games that they shouldn't have lost. I think they have, yes, Heredia Cologne coming back was a boon. When they play really well, they're fun to watch. They've got a ton of energy. They've got swagger, but it just doesn't show up consistently. And I know from a coach's standpoint, that can be uber frustrating where it's like, hey, we're just not hitting our potential. And I'm not saying they're not trying. When you know you could be better than you are, that part is frustrating. However, they're doing well as a program. They're in a good place. They're slated to make the tournament, I think. So that's why I would have them in the middle of the pack there.
3rd, I'm going to say USC. They lost a few players to graduation, to the transfer portal. So starting fresh with a bunch of freshmen, they were not highly ranked going into Big Ten season. To be currently tied for 4th when your crosstown rival was projected at 4th at the beginning of the season, like I would have seen that as a bit of a snub, but they're doing decently. They're getting some good wins against teams with a really young squad. So I think that is boding well for the future.
I'm going to go with Kentucky at 3. They're obviously winning a ton. They're in first place in the SEC, 13-0. But I think Craig Skinner and the coaching staff understands the way they are currently playing is not good enough to beat the top teams. I have to imagine that they are having conversations about running the middle, about doing other things. And it's just whether their freshman setter is nervous or just not thinking about it or not getting on the same page, it's not happening. And I think he can see where this train comes off the rails potentially, unless those two are just unbelievably good. So I think there's a little bit of apprehension there, even though they are pulling wins out. Like, I don't think they looked amazing against Tennessee. Hudson little injury, that's a scare. It's good, but there's a little concern there for what it looks like come tournament time.
Okay, I was going to put Kentucky at 2. They've had some huge wins in the SEC, taking down Texas decisively. I think the players that they brought in are definitely performing. I understand what you're saying about some red flags of winning it all, but I think right now they are poised to win the SEC, which is step 1. This is the closest that they have been to being a contender since 2020. I think they are satisfied, but not enough to be first place.
I'm going to go with Colorado at 2. I mean, they've had an incredible season in the Big 12 so far. I don't think anybody pegged them to be where they're at, pretty much regardless of how the rest of the season pans out. I don't think they're going to stay at 2. I think they're going to lose a couple more matches. You've seen where the program can go. You've beat the teams you've had to beat. I think they have some pieces in place that could potentially grow. You're in the conversation and you weren't before. So I think overall, right now, Colorado coaching staff has to be super happy with where they are.
And that's why I'm putting Colorado at 1. They were in nobody's conversation, on no one's radar heading into this season. I think they've already more than exceeded what they thought they were going to do and what they thought was possible this season. So regardless of how it pans out, just being satisfied, I think that has to keep you at number 1.
For similar reasons, I'm picking USC. If I'm a coach there, I'm loving our season. We've got so much potential. We're tied for 4th in the Big 10 with a bunch of freshmen, super physical. There's no way they thought they were going to be in this position at the beginning of the season, and it's just gelled for them. The future is just so bright. You're going to get a chance to go to the tournament, most likely, unless the wheels fall off in the last 3 weeks. If you ask their coaching staff, hey, you'll be in this position come, the first week of November, they're like, yeah, I'm going to take this every single time. Yeah, I think the USC staff is popping bubbly after the weekends. I hope you guys like these games. I keep trying to come up with things that could be fun and interesting ways to talk about lots of teams. Again, always open for feedback. If you guys have thoughts or you liked it and it's something we should throw into the rotation, let us know. All right, so as we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, we have just a ton of listener questions, which is awesome. We've separated the questions by topic, so we'll go through them one at a time, see where the conversation leads, and we'll leave it at that.
We are not going to make it through all of them. There are going to be a lot left over, but we have them all written down, so if we don't hit yours, we haven't forgotten about you. Topic 1 is Nebraska. We get a ton of questions about Nebraska.
And since we can't talk about them because they kill everybody, we'll just answer the questions.
And we also can't talk about them because if we do talk about them, everybody says that we are obsessed with Nebraska. So it's a lose-lose.
Okay, question 1. Sarah, I'm curious about your thoughts on DBK's approach to practice versus John Cook's approach to practice. DBK seems to like to actually have her players play/scrimmage during practice, as opposed to Cook's method of focusing on skills and drills more. Also, DBK likes to use many subs to maximize her team's collective skill set, whereas Cook is stuck with the 6 to 8 players and forces them to figure things out. What's your preference? And then Adam, how does this fit with your coaching philosophy?
I think there needs to be a balance. Drills are very important to work on specific techniques. And to learn new skills, kind of like expand an athlete's repertoire. I feel like just playing, it doesn't really expand an athlete's skill set in any way. And I think you need to get repetition at skills to make improvement. That being said, there is a place for scrimmage in practice, like high pressure situations, things like that. You have to run your systems, work on those systems. I think now with the transfer portal, we are seeing a lot more coaches get away from the drills. Why develop athletes if they're just going to leave and be your competition later? I don't personally agree with that, but maybe that's a thought process. I know when I played for Coach Cook, probably half the practice would be individual skill work by position, and then we would get into more live 6-on-6 scenarios in a drill context. I'm not a fan of just like playing a match or straight up scrimmaging in practice. I think there needs to be a purpose behind 6-on-6 play in practice. Overall, I would say a mixture of the two is necessary. As far as substitutions go, that's the reason you have a full team. Like, the 6 to 10 players that are on your bench, yes, it is important to have them as a B-side during practice, but everybody needs to have a role and be prepared to come in at any time. If a player's not performing or somebody's skill set lends itself to a particular situation against a particular athlete or team or strategy, absolutely they need to be brought into the game. And again, I'll say it, that is why you have so many people on a team.
Totally agree. What happens if one of your 8 get hurt at the tournament or late in the season? Then you're putting somebody in with no experience. My philosophy on practice is similar to Sarah's, where I think every athlete always needs to know what they are specifically trying to work on in any given context, whether that's drills or competitions. Again, assuming you have your matches more to the end of the week, I generally like to do skill development Monday and Tuesday, and then you kind of ramp into more competitive. That also gives athletes a chance to recover from playing on the weekend. I think a balance is definitely warranted. And when an athlete's learning a new skill, they need to understand what that skill is in isolation. If they're going to take it to a competitive environment, they need to know whether they're doing it right or wrong. So that individual skill development is really important.
Okay, question 2 for Nebraska. You say that a middle cannot be the go-to player for a team. However, Dana Retke was the go-to for Wisconsin in their 2021 run to the national championship. Watching Nebraska's latest matches against Wisconsin and Minnesota, it really looks like Alec and Jackson are doing really well as the go-to players for Nebraska. In the tight second set against Minnesota, the final points to win the set all went to the Nebraska middles. Okay.
You or me.
I have thoughts, but you can go ahead.
You can have a middle as your go-to player. It's just dangerous because you can't always get them the ball. Yes, if you pass well enough, set them all the time. I'm completely for that. I guarantee if we went back and looked at the 2021 stats, Dana Retke did not get the most number of sets. Now, again, we talk about the go-to player being the person who you want to have the ball in high pressure moments. That can be your middle. You just need somebody else to be able to do it if you can't get them the ball.
Unless there's a straight up ace, you can always get your outside hitters the ball. Always. Throw up a high ball. That is why we say middles can't be the go-to hitters, is because there are certain scenarios where it is impossible to set them. My other point is that if you watch Dana Retke run the slide, it is slow as hell. It is a slow slide, which could arguably be considered a right side attack out of system. And internationally, this is why I hate her slide so much internationally. It's because it's so slow. There's a huge difference between the speed that Retke runs the slide and Andy Jackson, which makes it easier to get her the ball because it is so high and slow. Okay, question 3. I'd love to hear more about Sarah's thoughts on Nebraska's opposite situation. Why the long leash? If, as both of us had said, we don't think DBK makes decisions to be nice. If this is the case, why isn't Sheck getting in more? Yeah, I'm not happy with the opposite situation. Nebraska hasn't had a dominant opposite in a while.
Since I've been there.
Well, I'm a dinosaur, so that's going way back. Honestly, they haven't needed it.
Well,
it's easy when you don't need it.
I think that is the key. Is she's a first year, she's coming in. If she turns into something long term, you've got her for 4 years and she can be a staple for you. I think DBK is having patience with her because she sees what the future could be for 4 years with a 6'5" opposite.
Yeah, we're talking a freshman versus a senior.
They don't need Sheck to win. So why not?
Right now, they don't need Adriano to win either.
But that's what I'm saying. She can figure it out. And she's not a blocking liability. She does well. Her skills around the game are quite good. Outside of, she hasn't found her attacking rhythm with Bergen Riley yet.
Honestly, she's not as good as I expected her to be.
That's fair. But you don't get a 6'5" opposite every day. I think there's way more upside to letting her stay in and figure it out, and it's not costing you wins. And I think that's why she's playing.
Question 4. Who is Nebraska's biggest rival today?
My instinct is Texas.
I honestly still think it's Texas, and I would add Wisconsin into the mix.
Wisconsin's a historical rival.
Well, Texas is historical. We're going back to Big 12 years here, where it was always Nebraska versus Texas. Like that, and that hatred ran deep.
Fair, but I think
let me tell you,
from a competitive standpoint, right now it's Texas. They're the closest.
Yeah, but I would argue like a rivalry isn't just like a year to year thing. It's long standing. It's built in tradition. That's why I'm saying Texas. And granted, Nebraska swept the floor with Wisconsin a couple weeks ago, but like in recent years, since they've come to the Big Ten, I would say it's developed with Wisconsin.
Yeah, totally. I guess I read that question as today question mark meaning historical context out the window. But that's fair. Wisconsin and Texas makes sense.
Okay, our last Nebraska question for today is what is it that makes Bergen Riley such a dominant setter? Okay, full disclosure, we've gotten so many questions about Bergen Riley. A lot of people think we don't like her.
She's our fantasy setter. Enough said.
She's on our fantasy team. Thank you so much. A lot of people have been upset that we didn't talk about her when we talked about the Nebraska-Wisconsin match. Fair, we didn't talk about her. We should have. But some follow-ups to that is it feels like Bergen Riley has really leveled up from last season and is changing the standard for high-level NCAA setting. She's forcing the middle even when it's almost unsettable. So all the questions around her, why don't we like her? What makes her so good? Is she National Player of the Year candidate? What makes her and what makes a setter so good?
Okay, let's get one thing straight here. Setters and liberos are in the same category. If you don't talk about them, they're doing a good job. It's a
I don't
harsh
recall
truth.
ever saying that we don't like her. I recall saying I think Izzy Stark's better, which I will stand by that. We'll see what a year without any practice does, but that's all I remember saying is that I think Izzy Stark is better. I don't ever recall saying that we don't like her.
I think it's the lack of.
Oh, you know what we did say last year? Her out of system setting was inconsistent. I stand by that. Nebraska's been in system for her whole career. Last season, her out of system setting was kind of all over the place, I thought.
I think that's fair criticism. Now, I will say, I think she runs a very balanced offense. I think she reads the game really well. I think she has found, like we talk about Rebecca Alec becoming a force in the middle. That doesn't happen only on her term. Like Bergen has to find her.
No, that connection is important.
And so she's done a good job with that. She runs Andy Jackson well. I really like her decision making, and I think her execution
the timing
has been really
of her
good.
dumps.
Yes,
her defense is outstanding.
She's very, very good, and I think the other piece is I don't think she's an international setter. She does everything well, but she's not going to set for Team USA. She could play pro here in the US, but she's not going to play.
People are going to be pissed.
She's not.
That you said that.
She's not going to be. I don't see it. I don't think she's dynamic enough to play at the next level, but she's incredibly good and she's the backbone of Nebraska. I think her and Jackson are the reason they're so good.
I agree that she's forcing the middle more, especially off the net. I think having a middle like Andy Jackson, whose window is massive, definitely helps. But I think a lot of people are crediting Nebraska's over 300 hitting percentage strictly to her. And while, okay, yes, that is accurate to an extent, I think it does a disservice to the other athletes that Nebraska has. A hitter doesn't hit 400 or a team doesn't hit over 300 just because of the setter. The hitters are doing their job as well.
Well, and there's two parts to that. One, you can have that high of a team hitting percentage when you're always in system. So that's the passing.
Well, they're less in system now than they used to be.
I mean, fair. Her being able to run the slide off less than ideal passes opens the floor up, and being able to have a couple back row balls helps. She does a good job of getting compromised blocks for her hitters, which goes to her credit, but your outsides still have to score. The other thing too, though, is that their hitters don't make a ton of mistakes, and that really helps your hitting percentage. If it's a kill or a continue, that boosts that rating.
Overall, I think, as Adam said, she's
one of the best setters in the NCAA.
100%. And we'll say it again. She was our pick for our fantasy team. Thank you so much. Although she's not scoring us very many points because Nebraska wins in 3 all the time.
Yeah, not the best.
So whatever.
Tournament time.
We're not bitter about it. But yeah, she runs a very balanced offense. Her decision making is sound. She's forcing the middle from compromised situations. She plays good defense. She gets decent touches on the block. That all of those contribute to how good she has become as a setter. And do I think she's a National Player of the Year candidate? Yes. And I think on a team like Nebraska, where not one player shines, but they are so incredibly dominant, it's hard to pick one player to stand out above the rest. So in a situation like that, it should go to the setter. Okay, the next category we created is other NCAA teams.
We need to get more listeners who are passionate about their teams other than Nebraska.
Yeah,
so
and
we
for
can
everybody
fire up
who's
a few
mad
more.
about the Nebraska talk, you need to submit questions if you're not a Nebraska fan. Nebraska fans tune in. They submit their questions.
And just so everybody knows, I'm Canadian. I didn't even know about Nebraska until
Adam
I met
has
Sarah.
no
I'm not a
allegiance.
homer at all.
I don't even think I would say I'm a homer. I'm pretty critical of Nebraska, probably more than other teams. This year, there's nothing to be critical of except their
Except for their
liberos.
passing.
Anyway, that's not going to get us any friends. Okay, question 1. Do you see anyone currently NCAA and who hasn't played VNL? So that takes Lednicki and Babcock off the table. Who have the potential to be on the national team before LA, USA, or Canada? Is there a good enough group of top players, or is it kind of closed off to the people who have currently been playing?
Well, Andy Jackson comes to mind for me.
Andy Jackson. I would have said Izzy Stark. Mind you, she still would have been in college, so the timing would have been a little iffy. I think we need to look at players who are like not going to be in college because they're not going to call somebody up who's in college unless they're hands down better than everybody else, I don't think.
I would agree with that. And you have to remember there's 14 roster spots, most of which are already spoken for. I could see Kennedy Martin maybe getting a look.
I think they would bring her to the gym for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so let's clarify. Do I think any of those players are going to make the Olympic roster? No. Do I think that there's potential that some of these athletes could be brought to a VNL week? Let's do it that way, because I think then you have a few more potential candidates who could make some noise in a VNL.
Honestly, Brooklyn DeLay maybe?
Yeah, so the 3 that pop into my mind are Brooklyn DeLay, Andy Jackson, and Kennedy Martin. I'm trying to think if there's a libero.
On the Canadian side, I am not thinking so.
No, not on the women's side, I don't think.
What do you think about Mimi Collier? She is similar to Sarah Franklin.
She's an interesting one. Maybe. She needs to pass really well, though.
And you already said no to Bergen Riley. I think they'll bring her to the gym for sure.
Oh, I think out of respect, she'll get invited to the gym, but I don't think she can make the jump to playing at that level.
I think Erica Sayer for Stanford, she's super young, so I would say maybe not for LA, but I think she has potential for sure.
Yeah, I think those are probably the athletes that are on the radar. I'm trying to think if there's any other middles who might get a look.
Do you think Koss of Paula would make it?
I don't think so.
It's so hard because there's so many schools and so many teams to like quickly run through them in my head.
The jump from college to US national team is large. You have to really separate yourself. And again, it's not to say that some of these athletes won't get there eventually, but we're talking they need to be invited to the gym. They need to go play pro. They need to elevate their games. Like, it's not going to be an LA thing.
Good question. I need to ponder this one a lot more. Okay, question 2 in this category. Can you talk about what you like about USC and what is working for them / what they should improve on to be a top 16 team? Well, they're almost there. They're 17 this week. You guys mention them now and then. I think this is their best performance in recent years. Also, what are your thoughts on their middles?
So the thing I really like about USC is potential. I mean, they're inconsistent at best, as we've talked about with so many teams in the NCAA. I have seen their young players get better and better as they play. Their team system has become more disciplined. I like what I see in terms of their offensive distribution. I think they really try and get their middles the ball, which I also very much like. Their middles are fast and they're high and they have quick arms. That's what I like. They're very physical. There's a really big window. They move laterally really well. There's a lot of physical pieces in place that have high potential to be utilized and for them to be very unstoppable down the road.
The middles are my favorite part of USC.
Absolutely. They're going to need Their libero's not bad either. I believe she's young as well. They're going to need to add a piece or two on the outside. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a few booster dollars going out for a left side next year to the transfer portal, just for a little bit of stability. I think the potential for USC is similar to Stanford, Oregon. Like they have
There's
Texas.
a lot of teams out there that are loaded with freshmen who've been forced into a rebuild that could be serious threats in coming years. And I think USC could for sure be one of them.
I will also say I've liked what I've seen from what the coaching staff is doing with them. You can see the athletes improving. You can see what they're working on. You can see the systems coming into place. I just think that staff has done a good job with young athletes.
Question 3, has Texas reached their ceiling due to how Swindle hasn't gotten any better as a setter? You guys, I did not write this question. I know you think I did. I didn't.
I mean, Texas's athletes are so physical that their ceiling is based off how those players are playing.
But what do I always say? A mediocre setter can make a great team not so hot. And a great setter can make a not so hot team very good. I think we're seeing option 1.
What I have seen from Texas is teams have figured out that Swindle doesn't like to get around balls passed from behind her.
The side setting. Get your hips around the ball. Let's square up every now and then.
So what that does, though, is it eliminates them being able to run the middle effectively. And now teams are loading up on the outsides from a block perspective, which makes life miserable for the outside hitters. I would say yes, until she squares and can run a good middle from around the attack line. I think that's their limiting factor.
We've talked about Texas's passing, but I think if Swindle worked harder to get around the ball, she could neutralize the not so good passes more than she currently is.
You know, I'm a fan of bettering the ball. I think
everybody is.
Swindle very rarely betters the ball. If the pass is good and in front of her, she's a competent setter. But she doesn't fix passes when she has to run, and I think that that's imperative.
And conversely, we've talked about how Bergen Riley is setting a good middle ball from off the net, and I think that's a big difference between the two.
Totally.
I mean, yes, she's 6'3", but at the end of the day, we've talked about how good offenses run, and it's finding your hitter's window. Question 4. This question was loaded.
Do that again.
Question 4. You both were so great at telling Texas what they need to do to correct their exposed problems. How would you improve Kentucky's team so that they can possibly beat Nebraska? I know you're both very prejudiced towards Nebraska, so let's see if you can meet this challenge. Whoa. Okay. Kentucky needs to set somebody other than their left side because Nebraska is about to munch them up. And you can be great, you can be outstanding. But when a defense as good as Nebraska's has time to prepare for only 2 players instead of 4 or 5, not great. So let's get the middle running a little more. Let's make the right side an equal threat. They won't be an equal threat to the left sides, but
the game plan against Kentucky is double block outside all the time and make the middles and right side beat you and see if they can do it.
Do not leave the left sides with a single block ever. React to the other hitters.
Nebraska will do that well. Unless Carr can score, unless whichever right side is playing, I think they're playing mostly Thigpen now.
Or Daly,
whichever one. Like, they need to be able to set them and score. They almost need to not set the left side in the first set and make Nebraska look and go, wait a second, now we need to reset.
I do like how Kentucky is mixing in a lot more short serves, though. I think that could be an interesting tactic against Nebraska, particularly with if they're using it to take out a middle. So I think their serving strategy is one of the more interesting ones I've seen recently. They're more creative than a lot of teams from the service line. If we're talking about straight improvements they need to make, you're too predictable.
Skinner knows they need to run a more balanced offense. He says that time and time again, and they don't. And I don't think they pass particularly poorly. I think they have lots of opportunity to run the middle. I think that the left sides have become a safety blanket for the setter. Mind you, I think she's a freshman.
She is.
I get that, but you got 3 weeks to build that middle connection with the freshie. Otherwise, it's not going to go well come Final Four time.
And Nebraska doesn't forget that they almost lost to Kentucky in 5 at the beginning of the season. Yeah. Like, they're not about to mess around. Okay, last question in this section. I was wondering if you guys could talk about why Jared Elliott wouldn't sub in one of the other outsides like Whitney Lowenstein for Abby Vanderwall in the matches against A&M or Kentucky. We had these questions about Wisconsin. I think certain coaches just have their system and they do not change. And even one of the earlier questions about John Cook, he used 6 to 8 players, didn't make changes. The thing that these coaches have in common are their era. They're not one of the young DBK or Dan Meskey age
They're
group.
the old guard.
Yeah.
Stepping back from that, I agree with what you're saying. I'm going to make a case for why they didn't so that we have another opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's a first-year player. Her ceiling is very high. You know you're going to need her to perform in the Final Four, in the tournament in general, if you're going to win. And there's no better way to learn how to deal with those situations than to be in it and have to figure it out.
I don't think that's Jared Elliott's thought process.
I'm not saying it is. I'm saying you could make...
I don't think he cares at all about that. With how they play the transfer game, it's like he is looking to win just today.
Yeah, but I mean, that today is this tournament. I'm not talking 4 years down the road. I'm talking...
No, I mean like today, like this match.
That would be my case for leaving her in. If that's your thought process long-term for the tournament, it's not a bad one because you're playing at a new level, new experiences, new challenges. Go back, watch the film, talk about your decision-making. All of that, I think, can be justified if you're thinking about it. The other thing I will say, and I've noticed this, is I feel like a lot of coaches just look at stats and have no feel for the game or for their players or for what's happening. I see it all the time. Head coaches are going to the stats guy, and that's a good thing. I'm a stats guy. I like that. But you have to marry what you're seeing on the floor. If a player's having a bad game because she didn't sleep well or something else, you're not going to work through that. You got to pull that player off, put somebody else in, give your team a chance to win. I think there's a disconnect sometimes between coaches and what's happening, and they rely too much on stats. Okay, so that's the end of all the other NCAA teams for questions. Moving on, we have a few questions about volleyball tactics. Perfect. Love this. So we'll go over these and we'll see what people have written in. Can you go over into more detail as to why, in your opinion, teams don't really run more pipes in the collegiate women's game? I'm always puzzled by this. I'm a Stanford fan, and I can recount on one hand the number of times Stanford has run a pipe in the last few years. I don't understand why coaches don't think athletes can run the pipe. Specifically, I'm thinking about Elia Rubin. Why do you think college coaches don't like to include the pipe in their offense? It's a very good question because it's an incredibly useful set.
I think when it's run properly. By run properly, I mean let the girls jump. Do not set it at the attack line. Set it way in front of the attack line and let them go get it. But you don't see a ton of setters run it properly.
And there's no reason that you can't run it properly.
Correct.
Which is the thing I don't understand. I totally agree that Elia Rubin could hit a really good back row ball. I also think, against Dan Metzke's thought process, that Chicoine could also hit a good back row ball. The goal of the back row ball, if you can jump forward at all and keep that ball in front of you, you don't have to be overly physical to make that attack work, especially if there's lots of other players in the front row and you're not getting a 3-man block. If you're using it as an out-of-system set, it becomes much harder. But if you're in system, it can be highly effective.
Well, the other thing is like a lot of teams take their right side out of the back row, and so it eliminates the back row ball that can be used in conjunction with a slide or as a third attack option if your middle isn't good at running a slide, keeping them in front. And you see a lot of DSs come in for certain left sides. I agree with what Adam's saying, and I think it needs to be implemented more, and I find it incredibly effective when it is. But I think the NCAA substitution rule has kind of made it so that it just can't be run.
That's a good point, but I do think that there are enough athletes who are in the back row and playing.
I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I think it needs to be used more, especially if you have a hitter a middle hitter that runs well in front of the setter.
So effective.
And Stanford does have some middles that can do that. Running a pipe over top of your middle in front and overloading the block, like we talked about a couple weeks ago, unstoppable.
I think that coaches miss the depth of the set. I think they see it at the attack line or behind and it doesn't score. You really need to watch where that ball is being contacted in relation to the attack line to understand if the set is good. You have to be standing there and watching, and maybe you don't see that angle very often.
Well, and for listeners who might not be aware, on a back row ball, you need to take off for your jump behind the attack line, but you can land so far in front of the attack line. And most of these girls are physical enough and jump well enough now that the ball can be set halfway between the net and the attack line, and they can make great contact. Personally, I much preferred hitting from the back row because it just opened things up so much. And when the ball is led like that and you're able to jump forward, you can just put so much on it and do so much with it.
Set more pipe balls.
Keep your right sides in for 6 rotations so they can be effective in the back row too. Just a thought.
A question on defense. People say a good libero is one that you don't notice. Does that mean if liberos are picked for a dream team, you take the ones no one has noticed the whole tournament? Or what is the main criteria there? To me, this question's a little cheeky.
Little cheeky, yeah. I'm not opposed to it. I like a little sass.
Yeah. Liberos are allowed to make spectacular digs. Okay, you can notice a libero do a great cover, make a sprawling dig. If you know the game and you watch, you see them covering seams. You see them passing a ton of court, making sure the offense is in rhythm, directing the defense, setting well out of system, like all of those things. And for people who are generally choosing these awards for dream teams, they're paying attention to those things. While the average viewer might look at the spectacular sprawling dig and go, man, that libero's great, generally the people picking the awards understand what makes that person in that position good, and those players are getting awarded.
As a casual viewer, if a team is targeting the libero on serve receive, that is not a good thing. Your libero should be able to pass well enough that teams don't want to serve them. Obviously, when people are attacking, it's not. I know announcers say that it's a thought process, but I'm going to say that it's not really a thought process of like, oh, I don't want to hit the ball to this player. No. You're seeing the block, you're hitting around the block, you're seeing where the defense moves, you're hitting to holes. If you're capable of doing that. Otherwise, you're just like avoiding the block. You're not actively trying not to hit to liberos, which drives me crazy when announcers say that. Stop it. I would say you're not noticing liberos because like when they do pass, they're passing well, or they're not getting served and they're just extending rallies.
So I played volleyball in college in Chicago and USAV for 15 years after. So I do know the game well, and I still study to this day. Please explain to me why blockers can see hitters starting their approach nearly parallel to the net and have only one option to hit hard angle, but the blockers jump straight up in front of them. This drives me crazy. Why don't they block hard angle? It happens all the time in the college game, not intentionally. Do the coaches ever point this out? I mean, totally valid. This comes back to eye work.
I think you would be so shocked at how many college players watch the ball when they're blocking.
Here's a fun little experiment for all of you who love watching volleyball. Pick a player who is blocking and don't watch the ball, watch their head. Watch where the head goes as the ball is being passed and moved around on the other side of the court, and you will know exactly what they're paying attention to. And for all of the blockers whose hitters blow by them into the angle, they're watching the ball, plain and simple. They don't even look at the hitter. It's blocking fundamentals 101.
If you're an outside hitter, I would say this isn't necessarily the middle's responsibility because they are trying to close to the outside. And they've got so many things to watch. I would say that in situations like this, it is predominantly the outside hitter's responsibility because they are the ones who need to find where their hitter is, if they're coming inside, what their angle is, whatever. and set the block for the middle to close. If the outside is following the play and isn't paying attention to their hitter, that is when you see them so far out of position, they get embarrassed on certain plays. But yes, if a player is coming with their, like, let's say you're a left side hitter and your left shoulder is towards the net and your whole body is facing your setter, you are not going to hit line with an immense amount of power. So yeah, in that scenario, the blockers should drop their hands into the angle. But I'm also shocked at how, I don't know what coaches are watching. There are some coaches, obviously, that are very good at making adjustments, but there are some games I'm watching and the same thing is happening. And I'm like, are the coaches not noticing this? Like, why are they not telling their players to do X, Y, Z? So I would say no, the coaches probably aren't telling them that because either they aren't great at noticing things live, or they're watching so many other things that it's just not on their radar.
I'm going to get on my soapbox for 1 second.
I can't wait. Adam's going to be so nice. His soapbox is a nice one.
Gold plated. I think blocking is the worst taught skill in volleyball almost at any level. The other thing that I think that is done incredibly poorly, and you'll see almost every team do this, every team has a blocking warm-up or a blocking drill that they do in practice where you jump in the middle and then the outside shuffle out and then you come back and you jump in the middle and then the middle and the outside go out. And you know what they're doing? They're doing mindless reps. And you know what they're looking at? Absolutely nothing. I will bet you that 90 to 95% of teams train blocking with no decision making, meaning they're going through the motions and they know where the ball is going to go or they know where they're supposed to be. And you're not thinking, you're not looking at a setter, you're not watching a pass, you're not connecting the situation to what skill you're supposed to do. And we do that in almost every other skill. And I don't know why it's not done in blocking. And this is why you see athletes just going to a position and doing a block, is because that's what they train. In my opinion, blocking is just not trained properly. It's not connected with decision making the majority of the time.
And that's how Adam sees it.
Oh, interesting question. Okay, how do players consistently and effectively tool the block? Is there a special technique that allows them to do that? Is it their approach, their arm swing, their wrist angle when they hit the ball? Is it a skill you can train, or is it just a feature of the game based off what you're seeing? And finally, do you think being able to tool the block with this much ease is more promising for a future pro career rather than someone who's just a straight power hitter?
I was never prolific at tooling the block.
That's not true.
So I'm probably not the player to ask about this. I will say when you get to a high enough level, just straight hitting with power, like, it doesn't matter. The defenses are so good that, like, you can hit it so hard and you'll get scooped like crazy. Yes, being able to use the block effectively will be an asset for later in your career or whatever. Hitting the block. You need to see the block.
And it all comes back to vision.
But I would say it involves a lot of wrist work.
Yeah.
You see players who just try to hit with power and, like, sometimes they tool the block, but it hits the ground so hard that they're not doing that on purpose. When you see somebody hit the ball so hard and it looks like it's going to be a block, but it just misses the sideline, they did not intend for that to happen. They got lucky.
Same thing if the ball, like, squeaks between a hitter's hands and goes to the floor on their side.
A blocker's hands?
Yeah, not intentional.
Not intentional. The ones that are intentional are the ones that are going out the sideline. Like this question was referring to Brooklyn DeLay and Eva Hudson and how much they do it, or high out the back of the court. And basically, you're not changing anything. You are making your swing. The people who do it best are the ones who are swinging high, deep into the perimeter of the court. And if you're doing that and you're hitting high, if it does contact the block, you're getting a favorable bounce. Similarly to if you're hitting down the line, if you use your wrist to hit down the line, you're going for a good swing, but if it hits the block, it will deflect because of the spin you put on the ball with your wrist. So I would say that yes, it works in people's favor, and you see certain players be more successful or do it more often than others. But my opinion is that they are just making good swings. that happen to hit the block. But it is something you can train. Okay, the last question in our tactics section is, how does a right-handed opposite struggle so much to hit on the left side? Or maybe not even struggle so much, but you can just tell they aren't as comfortable hitting on the left, which everything would say a right-hander should be more comfortable hitting on the left side, and a left-handed hitter should be more comfortable hitting on the right side.
For me, I believe it happens to be about where you generally contact the ball and what you see. So when you're on your, we'll call it your opposite side, so a right-handed right side or a left-handed left side, the ball has to come across your body and you're following it with your eyes, which means you have a little bit more time to see the block, to see where the ball is as it's coming across, and you can kind of cut it off or wait and come down the line. There's that trajectory of the ball crossing the plane of your shoulder before you hit it. When you switch to the other side, now you're really reaching out in front of you to hit that hard angle swing. And that can be an uncomfortable motion because you're used to waiting for the ball to come across your body. And if you do that on your dominant side, you're allowing the block to come into play because the ball's probably dropping, or you're losing your ability to hit angle as it gets closer and closer to you. So for me, I think it's more difficult for hitters because you wait so long for the ball and your timing of your swing it's just visually different for you as to when you need to contact that ball. We don't generally answer these, so we figured this was a good chance to do this, but there's been a whole bunch of personal general questions. Most of them are for Sarah, rightly so. So we'll tee them up and we'll see what she has to say. Did people doubt you more when you started playing beach because you were coming from playing opposite? Also, what was the transition like in general, i.e. training and the strategies you had to learn?
I'm not sure if people doubted me more because I was an opposite or because I was just an indoor player. The number of beach only people that told me that I would never make it on the beach because I'm an indoor player, I don't know how to think for myself, blah, 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 was shocking. As an opposite, obviously, I didn't pass for a lot of my career. I did pass in college for a couple years, believe it or not. I think Adam responded to a comment about that the other day. Nobody ever really said anything because I was an opposite, but comments were definitely made because I was an indoor player. And I would say that beach players definitely have a chip on their shoulder about how they can make adjustments because they don't have a coach on the court, whereas indoor players are just told what to do. And I think to a certain extent, sure, that's true. But once you reach a certain level, I think that that's complete bogus nonsense. The transition, it was humbling. I cried a lot.
True story.
I was naive enough to think that beach was indoor, played outside. They are two completely different sports. And for the first time in forever, I was forced to consciously think about how to perform skills. And these things had been second nature to me for so long. So going back to literally basics and having to think through things that I haven't had to think through for so long was interesting. Yeah, the transition is hard. Having to completely rewire my brain for blocking, for approach style, for serving set. It was a lot. And I almost walked away many times, but I'm glad I stuck with it. Helped me achieve a couple big goals I had.
What are some reasons that you and or other players switch pro teams? What are some draws for an athlete to sign with a different club aside from financial reasons?
Oh man, I think there are several reasons. I mean,
Lifestyle's a big one.
Lifestyle's a big one. Playing professional volleyball overseas is a chance for you to be immersed in cultures in a way that you wouldn't otherwise be able to, in ways that just traveling or vacationing, it can't do the same thing. So I think exploring different countries is a huge part of it. I think, sometimes there are management conflicts that you want to avoid or you don't want to deal with again, or there might be staffing things for a team that you've worked with a coach or a staff before, they've moved, you want to go with them. There could be strength of team, how successful the team is, playing opportunities for like Champions League or Club World Championships or things like that. There are so many options. I've known women to go to teams because they want to play with their partner. There are so many reasons why people would switch teams aside from financial ones.
I was wondering about your relationships in college and during pro. Are you very close with people at those levels? And does college to pro change the basis of those relationships? Social media presents college athletics as a found family, with the girls being very close, given that they spend 8 hours a day together. However, does that closeness continue to carry over into adulthood?
I can't really speak to how it is now because I think with the transfer portal and how much in and out there is from programs and the NIL, where there is a discrepancy in how athletes are compensated, I'm sure that introduces much more complicated dynamics than when I played in college. But when I played in college, yes, those relationships, it was like a second family, and those girls were my best friends. And I think that is part of the beauty of college athletics at that time is just we weren't being paid. We were playing strictly for the love of the game and for each other. And I think that there's something so pure, and that is the essence of sport. So I would say, in my experience, I was always much closer with my college teammates than my professional ones because professionally, you're all just in different parts of life. Like I went to a team at 21 and I was playing with 35-year-olds. What do we have in common? You know, they're married, they might have kids, and I'm just a kid myself, and vice versa. When I got a lot older, I could not relate to some of the people I was playing with because we were just dealing with different stuff. While I have discovered lasting, meaningful relationships throughout my professional career, I would say they were more rare than my college teammates. As far as who I still keep in contact with, honestly, not many people. I mean, were we to cross paths, would things be good? Yeah, for sure. You have the social media interactions now where you comment on each other's stuff and whatever. But to this day, my closest friend is Rachel Holloway, and her and I still have a really close relationship. So she is the college teammate that I've stayed closest to.
From a psychological standpoint, how does facing a rival who beat you in a big moment in a previous season affect the team the following year? Even if your roster has improved and you're objectively a stronger team, do players carry any mental baggage or added pressure into those matchups? And how can coaches help them reframe that moment? And as the follow up question, were there any teams that gave you PTSD as a player, and how did you overcome it?
I don't know if I can answer this question because I personally can't relate to this. There were never any teams that I was like scared to play or that I dreaded playing. In beach, I will say I had partners who had their own previous traumas with teams, or, you know, in their experience before we played together, they just could not beat a particular team and had kind of resigned themselves to the fact that it was just never going to happen. I personally cannot relate to that because maybe I was cocky or confident or stupid enough to think that I could beat everybody at any time. Which, chalk that up to whatever you want to.
Well, as a coach, that's the mentality you want to shoot for. To me, this question is broken into two parts. If you've lost to a team, once or twice, I find it's generally motivation to get after it, and you can do that. If that number becomes 4, 5, 6, 7, then you're dealing with a totally different headspace for athletes. The only way, or in my opinion, the best way to deal with that is to just focus on the execution of each skill and what you're trying to do in that moment. You want to take away those thoughts of, oh, I can't do this, or they beat me last time. Like, those are essentially just distractions. And you kind of label all of those things as thoughts that take you away from performing in the moment. And so you're always trying to get your athletes to be in the moment, in this point. What do I have to do? How am I going to perform this skill? And what are the relevant decisions I have to make? And if you can help them get into that point, then all of the history and all of that, it doesn't matter. So that's your approach in general.
Yeah, as far as the PTSD and how to overcome it, That's the reason sport exists, is because you start out on equal footing and anything can happen. That's what is so exciting about sport. For what happened in the past and what is going to happen in the future doesn't matter. All that matters is your preparation and your mindset in this moment right now, as Adam said. How to overcome it, prepare for those teams the exact same way you've prepared for every other team. Keep your routines the same. And you're starting at 0-0. What happened in the past doesn't matter. Nobody cares. I'm definitely simplifying it. I understand that something like that is difficult to overcome, but
It's all mental. It's all about, you see it with tentative swings, or I don't want to make a mistake. There are all kinds of distractions that athletes have to deal with that take them out of their ideal performance state. And something like this just falls into that category, and you're constantly working to keep your athletes in the present, focused on what they have to do next. All right, last question that we have here. Shout out to our listeners in Canada. I'm one of those people that lived in Toronto for a number of years and followed women's volleyball in the United States. I'm curious to learn about Sarah's recruitment story. How does one come from Kitchener, Ontario, little town, not that little, but kind of little, and land at Nebraska? What universities were in your final 2 or 3? What put Nebraska over the edge for you and made you commit to there? And what advice would you give to any other international high school volleyball player that is looking to play volleyball in a Power 4 conference in the U.S.?
this is a big question. Wow.
I'm going to say a couple things here because Sarah, we know she's cocky and thinks she can beat everybody, but she doesn't like to talk about herself. Sarah was recruited by literally every school in North America. So how did you make your choice?
No, actually, I wasn't. I was not recruited by Canadian schools.
Which is hilarious.
Seriously, Canadian schools did not recruit me.
That might have had something to do with your dad telling them that there's no
And then
chance
they were
you're
upset
going.
when I went to the States, and I was like, okay, whatever.
You could have gone to any U.S. college that you wanted to. How did you make your decision?
The reason that happened, the reason that so many schools became interested, I guess, were I played for a club team that went to American tournaments. So as a Canadian, if you want to get seen by top programs, you need to play in the States. It's really hard to convince coaches to come watch you in Canada, because that is, why would they come watch one player in Canada when they can watch 200 in the US for the same weekend? You know what I mean? So that was a huge part of my development. I actually, playing for my junior and youth national team, a lot of college coaches are involved in those programs on the American side. And so going to those tournaments, competing for Canada against college coaches, the word kind of got out, I guess, of like, hey, there's this young kid playing junior national team as a youth, like, and then I think the word spread. And then,
So for context, for people who don't know, Sarah played on the junior national team when she was 14 years old.
yeah. And then things started ramping up because of that. And then my team it all became massive when we went to a tournament at Penn State, the East Coast Championship, and my team won. And then it grew even more. So if you want to play Power 4, play for a club team that goes to the US for tournaments. As far as the schools that I had narrowed it down to, my top 5, I guess, were Nebraska, Penn State, Stanford, Minnesota, and Ohio State. Ohio State was a nostalgia thing, I think, because older players that I knew from Canada had gone there. It was in driving distance of where I grew up, so I went and watched a lot of games there growing up. But those were the top 5. When it came down to it, I was deciding between Minnesota and Nebraska. I think people were shocked that I chose Nebraska, because at the time, like, they were good, but they were like a Sweet 16 level team. They won in 2000, but after that, they weren't really making huge pushes. So I think the expectation or the thought was that people expected me to go to Stanford. The reason I chose Nebraska is I had a very distinct list of things that I wanted from a school and a program, a volleyball program. And quite frankly, Nebraska was the only one that checked every box. And that is how I made my decision. It's as simple as that.
What things were missing from Minnesota and Stanford that were on your list of things that were important?
The strength training program was elite at Nebraska. I didn't get a good vibe from the Stanford strength training. Minnesota's was fine, but it wasn't that level. I knew that I wanted to major in a science related field, and not knowing what the load or life would be like as a student athlete, I wanted a place where I would have strong academic support should I have needed it. Stanford did not offer that. They were very snobby in their mindset around academics, which, okay, they're very prestigious. Honestly, the Minnesota-Nebraska differentiator was so tough. And I remember I developed such a close relationship with Mike Hebert, who was the coach at Minnesota at the time. Like, I cried when I called him and told him I wasn't going to go there. You know, the fan support at Nebraska obviously was top. Academic support. The biochemistry program at Nebraska was very reputable, and that's what I ended up majoring in. Strength and conditioning. The ability to propel myself into a professional career afterward. The vibe of Lincoln was very similar to the town I grew up in. Just, yeah, everything. So that's how I ended up there. And I will also say I am one of the few people who waited until my senior year to commit. I made sure I visited all the programs I was interested in so I could make an informed decision. And the rest is history.
And do you have any other advice for kids in high school who would want to play in a Power 4? So that's how you go about playing. That's where you should go. That's how you get seen. You know, what are one or two things that you would say would allow an athlete to compete in those conferences?
Well, I think understanding that you're not owed anything. It is a very professional mindset. NCAA sports at the Power 4 level is a business, and decisions are made as such. So you're not owed anything. This isn't club volleyball. This isn't like we're here to play for fun. Everybody gets a chance. It is a business. It is professional, and it's cutthroat. And you need to go in with that mindset and understand that you need to earn everything that you're given, because nothing will be handed to you. And not everybody is cut out for that mindset, and that is totally fine. But that is how pro sports operate.
That's good advice. I think we still have an obscene amount
3 trillion
of questions, but we might have to do this again in another couple weeks. But this was a lot of fun. We appreciate everybody who submits questions. We hope that you guys like the answers. Again, if there's any follow-ups, hit us up on YouTube or social media.
I hope everybody enjoyed this switch up today.
Yeah.
I had fun.
I always enjoy answering questions. All right. As always, we got a few matches that we think you guys should watch this week that we will be watching. So looking forward, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, we have Texas A&M versus Florida. That could be an interesting match.
I'm finding the Florida team interesting still, even though they're not ranked.
Well, they're not ranked, but it's mostly because they're inconsistent, not because they're not capable of beating teams.
Which is the story for literally everybody minus 5 teams.
You know, who knows? Texas A&M has had some big wins. They've also had some losses. Same with Florida. Obviously, Texas A&M has been more consistent than Florida, but I think this one will be worth paying attention to. Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern, TCU versus Colorado. So
TCU's been on the downswing, and Colorado had a rough week against Kansas State.
Somebody is going to be able to right the ship on Thursday. So we will see which team that is. Again, I'm not expecting that to be a great game, but the implications could be interesting.
Or it could be interesting if both teams show up, and extra interesting if there's a dumpster fire on each side. We don't know.
Now we start to get into the games that'll be worth watching, period.
Well, mostly.
Yeah. Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern, Pitt versus Stanford.
Stanford's got a big week this week.
Stanford's got a big week this week.
Pitt and SMU.
I'm curious to see how far Stanford has come with their young players. Are they ready to show up, and what it looks like against really good competition? Stay tuned to that. My prediction could come true.
Adam's going to hold on to this Stanford winning the ACC prediction
just
to the death.
I said it, I'm not going to go back on it, but it could happen this week. Sunday, we got a couple games to watch. 1 p.m. Eastern, Louisville versus Miami. We'll see what Miami shows up. And then finally Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern, Nebraska versus USC. This will be a really good test for USC. I don't expect them to win, but
Will they win a set?
Probably not.
No, probably not.
But again, you have a whole bunch of young players who have nothing to lose, who are very physical. I'm curious to see how they respond to Nebraska's defense and obviously just relentless offense. That one I'm curious more to see what the development of USC's young players has been.
That concludes this week's episode of Volley Talk. There's always something shaking in the volleyball world, and we hope you enjoyed this little fix. Be sure to follow the show so you don't miss any updates, and we'd be so grateful if you'd leave us a 5-star review. You can also find us on Instagram at volleytalk_podcast. If there's a topic you'd like us to discuss, you can reach out to us on Instagram or at info@sarahpavin.com. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll be back next week.